and went back to join her set. Jeremy was surprised Arabella had given him a second look, let alone suggested they should dine together that evening. He expected that nothing would come of it, but as she'd already paid for dinner, he had nothing to lose. Arabella arrived a few minutes after the appointed hour, and when she entered the restaurant, several pairs of male eyes followed her progress as she made her way to Jeremy's table. He had been told they were fully booked until he mentioned her name. Jeremy rose from his place long before she joined him. She took the seat opposite him as a waiter appeared by her side. "The usual, madam?" She nodded, but didn't take her eyes off Jeremy. By the time her Bellini had arrived, Jeremy had begun to relax a little. She listened intently to everything he had to say, laughed at his jokes, and even seemed to be interested in his work at the bank. Well, he had slightly exaggerated his position and the size of the deals he was working on. After dinner, which was a little more expensive than he'd anticipated, he drove her back to her home in Pavilion Road and was surprised when she invited him in for coffee, and even more surprised when they ended up in bed. Jeremy had never slept with a woman on a first date before. He could only assume that it was what the set did, and when he left the next morning, he certainly didn't expect ever to hear from her again. But she called that afternoon and invited him over for supper at her place. From that moment, they hardly spent a day apart during the next month. What pleased Jeremy most was that Arabella didn't seem to mind that he couldn't afford to take her to her usual haunts, and appeared quite happy to share a Chinese or Indian meal when they went out for dinner, often insisting that they split the bill. But he didn't believe it could last, until one night she said, "You do realize I'm in love with you, don't you, Jeremy?" Jeremy had never expressed his true feelings for Arabella. He'd assumed their relationship was nothing more than what her set would describe as a fling. Not that she'd ever introduced him to anyone from her set. When he fell on one knee and proposed to her on the dance floor at Annabel's, he couldn't believe it when she said yes. "I'll buy a ring tomorrow," he said, trying not to think about the parlous state of his bank account, which had turned a deeper shade of red since he'd met Arabella. "Why bother to buy one when you can steal the best there is?" she said. Jeremy burst out laughing, but it quickly became clear Arabella wasn't joking. That was the moment he should have walked away, but he realized he couldn't if it meant losing her. He knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this beautiful and intoxicating woman, and if stealing a ring was what it took, it seemed a small price to pay. "What type shall I steal?" he asked, still not altogether sure that she was serious. "The expensive type," she replied. "In fact, I've already chosen the one I want." She passed him a De Beers catalogue. "Page 43, she said. "It's called the Candice Diamond." "But have you worked out how I'm going to steal it?" asked Jeremy, studying a photograph of the faultless yellow diamond. "Oh, that's the easy part, darling," she said. "All you have to do is follow my instructions." Jeremy didn't say a word until she'd finished outlining her plan. That's how he had ended up in the Ritz that morning, wearing his only tailored suit, a pair of lynx cufflinks, a Cartier tank watch, and an old Etonian tie, all of which belonged to Arabella's father. "I'll have to return everything by tonight," she said. "Otherwise Pa might miss them and start asking questions." "Of course," said Jeremy, who was enjoying becoming acquainted with the trappings of the rich, even if it was only a fleeting acquaintance. The waiter returned, carrying a silver tray. Neither of them spoke as he placed a cup of mint tea in front of Arabella and a pot of coffee on Jeremy's side of the table. "Will there be anything else, sir?" "No, thank you," said Jeremy, with an assurance he'd acquired during the past month. "Do you think you're ready?" asked Arabella, her knee brushing against the inside of his leg, while she once again gave him the smile that had so captivated him at Ascot. "I'm ready," said Jeremy, trying to sound convincing. "Good. I'll wait here until you return, darling." That same smile. "You know how much this means to me." Jeremy nodded, rose from